That's what I like to do, is I like to have people come to me and say, we don't know how to get from here to here. We're stuck this. Everybody's doing this thing. We know something else is going to happen. Now it's AI. A couple of years ago it was blockchain, whatever. And say, using that technology, how do we make this current mode of thinking obsolete? So that to me that's more exciting than doing what I'm told, I guess, is being given a goal and meeting the goal in ways that are unexpected.
Do you want to 10x your business? Really start scaling it up with some great strategies? Then I got the guest on the Business Library you're going to absolutely love. I've got Jeremy. I invited him on here. Had an absolutely amazing conversation with him beforehand, like a couple of weeks ago, talking about a bunch of different things. So we're going to talk a little bit about culture, but a lot of it is going to be shifting your thinking to really 10x your business. So stay tuned for that. But first of all, just so our listeners get to know you a little bit, Jeremy, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your unique upbringing, and also the diverse cultures you experienced?
Sure. Thank you. So I think my background might be unique in business. Not really, because I come from a background of theater and graphic design, and I got into business that way. What that helped me do is it helped me become a better storyteller. So I have a deep root. I have a deep foundation in storytelling as a foundation for business. So when I talk to people and I do presentation coaching, or I do pitch coaching, or I do sales, I'm really looking at how are we connecting to the audience? How is the audience going to use our story to be successful in whatever they're doing after that? So that means, really briefly, if you're talking to a manager or somebody like that, they have a very different need and what they're going to use the data for than a CEO. So a manager would need, 6 pages and lots of graphs and charts. A CEO needs like one sentence, one chart, and then to get out. So when you're talking about that, it really helps to come from a background of understanding how people use information and what they're going to get out of your story. And as far as my diverse cultural background, I'm from the United States. My wife is from another country. Most of our friends are from other countries. So we're either traveling and exploring new cultures and new foods, or we have people over from other countries, and they're bringing their culture into our house. So our kids are really very global in their approach. They're both bilingual, and we really welcome other people in to find out where they're from, as opposed to, I think some people they're more used to saying, well, this is what I know and this is where I'm comfortable. We're more comfortable learning about other people than we are about staying with what we know from where we started.
Well, I think that's a powerful mindset to have in business.
It is.
Because if you just stay in the same area, the same place, status of your business, you don't really scale. It's guaranteed somebody's going to overtake you. Basically, everybody's going to overtake you if you just stay the same, because they're going to keep evolving. So right. Is that also how it really helped you in your business? Can you put a few words on that, actually?
It is. Yeah, and I think this is something I read in a science fiction book. So I read business books in the morning to kind of raise the floor. And then I read science fiction books at night to raise the ceiling. And we can talk about that more if you want to. But something I read one time is the answers that somebody gives you today work for them today. Tomorrow they'll have a different set of needs and a different set of answers. So really listening to people who are giving you an answer based on their experience won't help you in your experience ever, because they're going to be a different person tomorrow, and whatever happened to you yesterday that made you who you are today, that's going to be different tomorrow for you as well. So I think not staying in the same place, but always approaching every problem as if you've never seen it before, and thinking, what conversation did I have earlier today that would change the way I'm going to answer this question? I think that's a really powerful lesson that I've learned from other leaders, from mentors, from writers, and just from my own experience.
I was just about to say, when you mentioned the fiction books, well, you didn't really want to keep this conversation brief, because that was a part of one of the questions I've written down, because it really caught my eye last time we spoke, and definitely we'll be getting into it later. But I was like, you just skipped to the end. Just like, our last conversation dragged on a little bit for the audience listening to us. But getting into really like scaling up a business, because you help companies like 10x their goals, 10x their growth by shifting their thinking. So can you walk us through like an example of when you did that for a client, or it could also be your own business? Both examples are great.
Sure. So a client I'm working with right now came to me and they had a goal. we'll just say it's $100,000. So say they want to make $100,000, and that was their goal. And they came to me and said, help me do that. And I said, the best way to do that is to add a zero to your goal. So if you're trying to make $100,000, you should try to make $1 million. And they said, well, I can't make $1 million. And I said, and that's why, because you can't make $1 million. And I think this is probably also going to be another one of your questions, is you have to take yourself out of the equation. If you're trying to do something and you're trying to go up a level, then move everything up a level. If you're trying to hire 10 people, try to hire 100. If you're trying to get 10 clients, try to get 100. If you're trying to get $100,000, just add a zero and try to get $1 million. What that does is it stops you from thinking in tasks. And it stops you from saying, how would I do this? Because you can't. And you have to think, how would that get done? One of the other things I do, which we can talk about more later, is intentionally get into that mindset. And don't think, how can I do something? How can you do something? But how would that get done if we had no restrictions? And it really makes you think not, okay, what are the steps I have to do? But what are the systems I have to have in place and have other people run because I don't know how to do them? So that's something I'm working on right now with a client, and that's going very well. And it's going from, they're trying to make, call it $100,000. And I said, well, once you've made that, you should also have systems in place that passively give you multiples of your revenue. So if you're making 100,000, you should be making $100,000 off ideas you had that you have turned into systems that are just throwing money at you. So you're operating from a position of comfort and a position of power, and not trying to get to the next level, especially in today's economy, which is really difficult.
Why do you think we as humans, like we go, a lot of us at least, naturally go to, I'll just do this next step. I don't want to set the bar too high. Probably the best way to put it.
I think part of that comes from school. I think part of that comes from we've been conditioned to not fail. We've been really taught that failure is a bad thing. And that's never been true. Without struggle, there's no growth. So if you stop learning, you stop growing at all. Specialization is great for insects. I don't think it's really good for people. So I think when you're in school, there are two different kinds of learners. And this is just a comfort zone issue. There are people who are comfortable doing tasks, and the teacher will say, okay, this is the correct way to do math. This is the correct way to express yourself. This is the correct way to sit up and do all of these things. And those people will do them, and then they get rewarded and they go home, and that's fine. There are other people who would rather learn by experience. So they don't want you to tell them how, they want you to tell them the goal. And then they'll come up with different ways to reach the goal. Those people will fail over and over and over as they try to reach the goal. And it takes a very special kind of resilience, or just being stubborn, I guess, to be able to persevere in an environment where you're punished for trying, especially in an environment where from a very early age, half the class is taught that it's okay to punish people who try. So they're used to, oh, well, you're not allowed to do that. The teacher said, no, you can't try. And I think, when you get out of school, that doesn't actually apply to the real world, but those people persist. So then you have people who are task-oriented when they're young, get into task-oriented roles when they're older, and then they mimic the behavior that they saw when they were 9 or 10 years old, and they continue to punish people who are trying, and it makes for a very restrictive environment for jobs. So I could probably talk about that for an hour, but I think that answers what you were asking, which is, why are we afraid to fail? We were taught to be afraid to fail, and I don't think that's healthy. I think we need to get away from that as fast as possible.
Well, failure isn't like an evil. It isn't a bad thing. Like, it's the natural occurrence of when you're learning something new, when you're experimenting with things. If you believe that, okay, I'm going to try this and it's going to work, it might, the chances of it not doing the first time are very, very high. So if it just works, you got lucky. And a lot of the times you probably build an even better system and even build like more resilience, but also have a higher chance of keeping that success if you fail a few times. Like you used the word stubborn. I often, in an ironic way, say I'm just too stupid to quit. I don't care. I'm just going to keep going. This has to work somehow. I don't know how, but it is going to. And one thing I think school has taught me, which is very applicable to the real world, is the way I kind of figured out school was reverse engineering the system. Okay, what do they want? Okay, how can I do this? Then learn a lot of things by actually doing that, besides, of course, how to reverse engineer things, which is a great skill to have in most cases. You look at something and then you break it down afterwards. I think that's great. So I'm very thankful that they taught me that. But all of a sudden, school got kind of easy, and it was just a walk in the park. I didn't care too much. I don't think it's that important for learning the specific subjects. But what would you say is a good way for a person that's been taught in school, like most of us, failing is bad, don't fail, do well the first time, to actually build up that encouragement to start failing?
If they're an adult, that has to do with changing your environment. And actually, I want to go back to something you said where you reversed engineered school. I think what you did is you reverse engineered the goals of the teacher.
Yes.
And you figured out what the teacher needed. And this goes back to what we were talking about first, which is when you're telling a story to somebody and when you're giving them information, you need to give them information so they're successful at their job. And in school, there's no difference in that in a job in pitching and selling or being in a play or a movie or making an ad. So what you did is you figured out what the teacher needed as a minimum requirement for you to move on so the teacher didn't get punished. Because when a teacher fails you, it's because they have to get you to a certain level. So if you can give them the minimum amount that they need to succeed, you'll be fine. You don't need to go through all of the hoops and jump through everything they tell you to. You just need to give them the story they need to hear so they've met the requirement and they're getting praise for their job and they're getting rewarded. That's all. So that's great that you did that. That's what I got out of school too, is I actually would go to teachers and say, oh, your teaching assistant told me that you liked this, so I bought you a bag of that. And I was, a child, but it was still, this will be easier if, it's not a bribe, but here, I bought you a bag of coffee or whatever, because I need you to help me with this and help me understand X. And that seems strange, but now we do that all the time. I think, so your question is, how do you teach people to do this? That's
to some extent.
hard. Yeah, and I've had people ask me that when I'm in an office, is they'll come to me and say, can you teach me how to think outside the box? And I literally had somebody say that sentence to me when I was working at a financial place. And I just said, no. I said, I'm really trying to fit inside the box. Like, I don't have any context for thinking outside the box because I don't see it. So I'm trying to understand how you are being judged. If I teach you to think outside the box, you'll get fired. So when people are at work, there's a reward system in place. And if you go against that, then you're not a good employee by definition. So it becomes, you have to find a role or create a role, and you're entrepreneurial, where you are rewarded for failing. And that's kind of it. Like, you have to figure out a role, which is innovation and entrepreneurship and strategy and things like that. Or you have to find a leader within the company who rewards failure on purpose. And there are people like that. But then it becomes difficult to get rewarded within the system, I guess. So I wish I had a really quick answer for you on how do you get out of that? And the answer is, if you need a salary, you need to figure out either how to do your task and get the salary, or you need to, again, 10x your goals and go off and do it by yourself, which I think usually is easier. I think usually,
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's easier to say, okay, rather than getting paid $50,000 or $100,000 to do this task, let me look at the kinds of clients that are attracted to this work, because the company is getting paid much more money to do that. So one of the ways to do that, I think, is to steal sheep, which is to say, if you see a large company and they're going after a very specific target market and making a ton of money doing it, that means they're intentionally avoiding specific niche markets because they have to. There's no reward there, at least not at their level. If you can find a way to go after that niche market and really incrementally improve their experience, you will make 2 or 3 times as much money as you were making, if not 10 times as much. And you'll create your own market of $10 million instead of like doing the work and making 100,000, you'll then create a new market for yourself. That's the way I've seen that done most successfully, I think.
So you would just go in, analyze a company, find something you're interested in, of course, and yeah, somewhat knowledgeable in, I'd imagine, and then go find the companies that's doing well in that industry, and then I guess making some notes of what niches are not being, or what like really specific niches are not being targeted. And I'm correct?
Yeah, you would just figure out how to improve the experience of the customers or the employees. And so I had a company before this called Sibling Technologies, and we exited in 2022. Before I started Sibling, Adobe placed me as a recruiter with a company for about 6 months. So I really learned recruiting, like the science of recruiting and how it's done from an industry leader. And then I deconstructed that entire experience, flipped it upside down, and started basically a full-time staffing company where we would hire one kind of employee. We would overpay them. We would give them better benefits. We would give them their choice of work. We would let them run things instead of sticking them in the back room. And we created a better experience for the employees. And we were able to charge much more money than the other company was charging. And that was our job. So we had 10 or 15 very senior Java architects in a very specific Adobe platform. And we were the only company like that. One of our clients said we were the only company like that on earth. We didn't have any junior employees. We didn't have any other type of employee except for this senior architect. And we built up a portfolio of those people, and Adobe used them to lead all of their work for 5 or 10 years. So I think there's a way to do it. And that started with me working at a small agency, learning about the Adobe platform. And then Adobe worked with me to go and start something that would be a better funnel for them. So there's always a way,
There is. It's just about like seeing the path. Sometimes it's very well hidden.
Right. And also sometimes the path you're told to be, it really goes back to, are you comfortable being task oriented or are you comfortable being goal oriented? And for goal oriented people, working in a task oriented job leads to pain. I would say like addiction and alcoholism, but it really leads to being miserable and having to find a way to de-stress at the end of the week because your job is so bad for you, as opposed to somebody who wakes up and they're excited on Monday to go to their work and go do their job. That's one thing. But if you're one of those people that lives for the weekend, you probably should have a different job, because you should love how you're contributing to society and how you're helping people, and not have that be a source of stress for you.
I believe some people, they just don't like contributing to society. Yeah. I've seen a few too many people like that to not believe that's the case. And just circling really back to the question I asked you in regards of how to learn to fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a lot of people in Denmark, they like winter bathing. Just jump in the cold water. It's not going to kill you.
Right.
That's the simple and easy solution for you. It might be too simple for the people listening that wanted that question answered, because, that can't be it. It is. It ain't going to kill you.
Right.
But going into something you talked about in the ways of using pronouns or stop using pronouns, which is kind of an interesting word to use talking on a business podcast. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure. Yeah. So that's one of the exercises I lead with when I'm doing coaching, which goes back to 10xing your goals. So that works in combination with that. And then the third part is keeping a journal so you can actually track your progress. So when you have a goal, and this is what I started talking about before, first, add a 0 to it. And second, stop using pronouns. You don't want to say, how would I do this? You want to say, how would this get done? You don't want to say, I need you to fix what you did because it's broken. You want to say, how would this get fixed? And otherwise you're creating a me versus you mentality. I think if you have a very small company, it's fine. I think if you're a solo entrepreneur and you have a couple of freelancers, that's great. And you tell them what to do. And that works, when you have 3 or 4 freelancers. But when you start having real employees, especially when you want to get past 10 or 11 people in your company and you start hiring managers, if you're still telling a manager what to do, then you're the bottleneck. You need to hire managers and ask them what they need from you to be successful. And at that point, you have to make them into a mental shift from being the boss to being the coach. So that's why I say don't use pronouns, is you don't want it to be me versus you. You want it to be us, and you want it to be the activity, and that's it. So if you are trying to make $1 million and suddenly you're trying to make 10 million, and you're keeping a journal and you say, okay, what parts of this process can I not do? And you say, well, I need a manager for this and a manager for this. You have to let go. And you have to say, let me find somebody much smarter than me who doesn't want to be the boss, and bring them in and say, what do you need? And you give them the resources they need, and they are successful. If you make it, I need you to do this, they will never trust you. They will never have any room for growth. They won't be able to really be the best that they can be and really explore what success looks like for them. So that's what I mean when I say stop using pronouns, is when you're running a business, it's not personal. And if you make it, this is mine, this is me, and I have to do this, you run into all sorts of problems.
Something actually I'm gonna start getting better at, because not that I haven't employees, but I think it's a better way of describing it. And the words we use have a very big impact on how our brain operates, how it functions. It can change everything, and it will change everything. Anything that goes on, it's all up here. It might be hard to change. It might be a difficult experience, but it is all up here. It's not that. That's not the complicated part, finding out where it goes on. And one of the things, if you're micromanaging your managers, they're all going to be asking themselves, why does this guy hire me? Don't do the work yourself.
Right.
Why am I here? Why are you paying me a lot? I don't understand. And it's one of the main things you hear if you read like autobiographies from Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. They all say, I hired people that was a lot smarter than me. All of them say that. At least the autobiographies I've read so far. I haven't heard anybody say, I micromanaged all of my people. I didn't give them any freedom to do what they were great at. I gave them a task list. No. That's not what they do. They hire the geniuses that can go out and create greatness by themselves. And a lot of people do prefer to be the number two. And in a lot of cases, as far as my understanding, number 2 and number 3 and number 4 is a lot more lucrative position than number 1.
True.
Plus, you also, if shit really hits the fan, end of the day, you're not the main person that's in the sight, the target of what's going on. It always gets pushed upwards. If anything
one of
goes
the ways
wrong,
I've
go ahead.
Well, I heard somebody say that by saying don't hire a dog and then bark for it. And that's kind of it, is if you're going to bring in somebody with a different skill set. Like I was working in some agency, and somebody said, well, you work for that guy. I said, I don't work for him. We work for shareholders. I work with him, and he has a different set of skills and a different set of responsibilities. I don't work for him. My role reports up to him, but he trusts me to do the work I'm doing. And I had one owner of a small agency in Atlanta walked into my office one time, and he came in and just kind of looked at me for a minute, and we hadn't really talked that much. I was below him a couple of levels. And he said, and he looked right at me, he said, when you talk about this company, you act like it's yours. And then he didn't say anything. And I thought, I'm either going to get fired in the next 10 seconds or I'm not. And that was kind of it. So I looked at him and said, it is mine. And he looked at me and he went, how do we get more people to feel that way? And he walked out. And I talked to him later because he was getting ready to sell the company. And I said, when you tell people what to do, he was an actor too. Like he was an actor before he was a CEO. I said, when you tell people what to do, they think you're telling them what to do, not that you have an idea and you want their feedback. And he said, why? I said, because you're an actor and you're used to inhabiting a character. So you say, this is what we're doing now, and this is how we're going to do it. And they go, okay, he's crazy. And they do what you say because they don't understand.
With the crazy man.
Yeah, they don't know that you grew up in an environment where you become a character and people go, nah, don't do it that way. Try it. And they don't get that. And he went, oh, that's weird. And that had never occurred to him. And he was running the company for 20 years. And people just thought he was insane because he would say, we're now this company, and everybody would shift directions. He's like, why'd they do that? And he didn't understand, and they didn't understand. So he would kind of keep it quiet, and they would keep it quiet, and they kind of protected the company from him. It was this very weird dynamic because he didn't he didn't understand how to manage two people. So, I think a lot of this is going to come down to what's your comfort level? What do you want out of a job? What's the next step for you? These are things I did not learn when I should have. Like I should have spent my 20s just following people that I wanted to emulate and learning the skill, and then spent my 30s building that on my own and building that up. And instead I didn't. Instead I would just follow things that made me happy, followed goals that made me happy, learned things. And I built tremendous stuff with great teams. But I think my life would have been a lot easier if I'd had much more of a North Star. And like what we were talking about, if I didn't have to go through failure is bad and I don't fit into a job, and I'd known, okay, there are roles outside of the job that you can actually do better and follow your own goals and be rewarded for that. So I'm happy I found them. It took me way too long, I think.
Well, we always think that.
Yeah.
No matter what pace we did it. If it's 100 days, then why didn't I do it in 90?
Right.
If it's 90, then why didn't I do it in 80? And it keeps going like that, either up or down. But it's always like, you could do it faster, and you can do it faster now. Because you went through the experience once. So you can always tweak it. And I think that's an important thing to not dwell too much on. Like, it's important to reflect, understand how you can do it better, but leave it at that. It ain't gonna help you spending a whole lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah,
Shut your brain off.
I don't look backwards. That doesn't bother me. And I think, like, especially now we're in this economic downturn in the United States, and I'm sure, it's affecting the rest of the world, but here it's very quick and painful. And a lot of people are panicking. A lot of people here have lost, 50, 60, 70, 80% of their savings. A lot of, I'm hearing people talk about coming out of retirement and they have to go back to work. And I think being an entrepreneur, we're so used to building up a resilience to that. Like, I've failed so many times. I mean, in ways that would just scare people to death. And to me, it's just, okay, that's business. So when I look at this situation where, okay, well, we can't do that and we can't do this, and suddenly you don't have this much freedom, now it's this. I had a professor, I have a master's degree in entrepreneurship, which is not a metaphor. I had a master's degree in entrepreneurship from a university, and I was their first candidate for it. And the head of the department said one time, it's not that you don't have the same goal, it's that you have a narrower avenue of responsibility. Like, you can't go here, you can't go there. Some people are great at big thinking, some people are good at organizing pencils by size, and that's fine. Like, everybody needs to kind of operate within what they can do. But when it becomes more restrictive, when things happen that you didn't plan for, you have the same goal. You just have to narrow the path that you're using to get there, and you just have fewer options, but you're still going to get there. So it's like what you said. You just have to imagine, I know it's going to work. I'm not going to fail. There's no way to fail. And imagine yourself on the other end of it and say, okay, when I succeeded, how did that work? What did I do to succeed? And just, do that. So it's hard, but I think entrepreneurs are going to have a much easier time. I think people that have learned what you were talking about, and they've learned that it's really okay to fail. That right now, this environment is going to spawn so much innovation. The same way the pandemic did when people were trapped in their house and everything got automated. That right now in this environment, it's not just going to be bad, it's going to be chaos, but there's going to be a lot of innovation, a lot of automation, a lot of new opportunities that come out of it. So in a few years, when we do come out of it, there are huge opportunities that have been built along the way for people. So I'm excited about that. Like, it's going to be scary, but I'm optimistic and excited about what everybody's doing right now to get through this.
Yeah, I have a few points I want to touch upon after what you said. First of all, like any recession, that's opportunity at the end of the day. And when something bad happens, you can choose to view it as a bad thing, or you can choose to find a positive. For example, if you start taxing and tariffing the hell out of our medicine, like, tradespeople are actually going to start become affordable again, because our medicine companies employing all of them for twice the salary. So you can't get anybody. So if they lose a bunch of business, well, the rest of us can actually get our house fixed for an okay price again. So that's a way of looking at it in a different light.
That's true.
Something good at, like, every time. It's all about perspective at the end of the day. And a thing I kind of hit the point home for failure for me. Like failure isn't necessarily a bad thing, depending on how you define it, which is what I'm going to break down. Like when you go out and do something, there's three things that can happen. You succeed, great. You learn a lesson, you ain't going to do it again, great. Or you can fail because you chose to not learn anything. Like that's the only time when failure really happens. Like lesson and success, both great things. You need both of them. Like one of the great examples that came along with that when I was first taught that principle was, is it Edison or Tesla who invented the light bulb? I can't quite remember. But one of them, the guy that invented the light bulb, like he said, like he didn't fail 10,000 times. He just found out 10,000 different things that didn't work. So he didn't do that again and just kept trying. It wasn't a failure because he kept switching, changing an approach, like constantly, like just becoming better at the end of the day. And at the end of, as I mentioned before, like going out succeeding the first time, it's not skill, it's luck. No questions asked. Unless you're like very knowledgeable in that specific area, work with it like for 40 years, you know so much. Then we can argue about its skills, and I probably agree with you. But one of the things you also talked about earlier in this episode, and also on a previous calls, was reading science fiction books before going to bed. And how does that help you in that entrepreneurial space?
I think looking at how other people prototype emerging technologies and incorporate them into society is important. And I think because tools allow us to build so rapidly now that we've lost that as a skill. So especially with me, with a background in theater and film, when you look at movies like The Terminator, what The Terminator is a movie director rapid prototyping using stop motion photography and practical makeup effects. That's all that was used in that movie. There wasn't special effects. So they had a puppeteer running, they had a bunch of puppeteers running the Terminator walking along, and then you had practical effects on the actors and practical effects on something else. And he said, how would I create a rapid prototype of a walking android that used a large language model and a heads-up display to navigate a physical environment and mimic human behavior to get them to trust him? And when you say that today, well, that's what we have. You can go buy that anywhere now. Like you can buy a home robot and you can use ChatGPT and you can get a heads-up display, but that didn't exist before he did that. So the idea that he would use puppets and lipstick and things like that to show you what was in his head, and that 40 years later, people are building that, and that's, you know, each one of those things is a huge business. That's why I read that. That to me is the fastest way you can see how to incorporate emerging technologies into human experience. So, okay, it's a time-traveling robot that wants to kill everybody. Fine, whatever. But when you look at spaceship movies, you still have humans on the ships having to deal with things, but suddenly they're in zero gravity, or there's a hologram. And the people who are building that actually have to think, how would I build a hologram? And they have to make it pretty realistic, because this isn't the 1970s. Like, you have to make it where people go, yeah, that would work, because people are so technologically sophisticated today. There's a guy in Disney, I don't remember his name right now, and he has hundreds of patents. But he just made a lightsaber that looks like a lightsaber, and it works like a lightsaber, and it's physical. It's not like a light beam coming out. Okay. But it makes the sound, and it does everything, and it has these two rolling tracks inside, and it extends. But it's as fast, and it mimics exactly what was on the film, and it's great. Even a better story coming out of Disney, when they were doing the most recent set of Disney films, you know BB-8, the little rolling ball with the magnet with the head on it? So in one of them, they have this little rolling android in one of the Star Wars movies, and it follows Rey around. So it's the new one where it's, I think, The Last Jedi. So there's this rolling ball called BB-8, and it has a head that balances while it's rolling around. That's a practical prop. And they didn't know how to do it. The guy just sketched, he drew two circles and said, make something like this. And it wasn't ready until a week before they started filming. But these two guys spent 3 months or something, and they physically built the android that had never, the technology didn't even exist to do what it was talking about. And the actors got so used to it, they forgot that it was like that there's somebody with a little remote control running it, because it did exactly what it was supposed to do. And it was such an immersive experience. So I think that science fiction, for me, is the best way to say, okay, how are people incorporating holograms or video or real-time communication, not across miles or hundreds of miles, but from Earth to Mars or Earth to the Moon, which is going to be a practical concern very soon. What happens when humans are in space for too long? What happens when, all those things that we have to think about. How do you grow plants? How do you get oxygen? I have not seen a science fiction movie in 20 years that did not have gardens and plants on a spaceship, so you can get fresh oxygen on a spaceship. Like, I just haven't, people started just using that as okay, you have to have an ecosystem like Earth. You have to have water and oxygen in these things. So that's what I do. In the mornings, I think about what tasks I have to do, and I listen to business books at probably 2 or 3 times speed for maybe half an hour. So I'll listen to 2 hours of business books on audio to prepare me for what I have to do that day. But at night, I just let kind of science fiction wash over me while I'm reading it. I don't listen to it. I just read it and use more of my imagination rather than watching a movie or something. And that helps me think, okay, I see how he's doing it. How would I do it? I see how she wrote that. What would I do? Oh, okay, their tattoos aren't tattoos. They're actually under the skin using whatever for, okay, fine. Why? What does that do? So I've used that technique to build a lot of things. So I was on a team that there were hundreds of people working on this, but the Coke machines that are touchscreen, either the big ones or the small ones. And a designer, one of the other designers on the project, asked me last year, we did it probably 15 years ago, but last year he said, when you were designing it, how were you coming up with your designs? Because he's an industrial designer and he's a classically trained designer, and I'm an actor. So he was telling me his approach, where it was like this design and what's this, and he would draw it down. And I said, I actually imagined a Coke machine on Star Trek. And I thought, if there are people using it and we're looking at the person and you can't see the machine and they're really excited and they call somebody over and they would say, come look at this. And then the camera goes around, what's on the screen? Why are they excited? How are we going to build that? And I would do these interfaces like, okay, if it doesn't have Sprite and you're trying to buy a Sprite, maybe it has Bluetooth and it knows there's another machine downstairs and it tells you, hey, take your phone, tap it here, go downstairs, tap it, and I'll give you one out of that machine. Like, let's make this thing predict the experience in a way that doesn't exist today. And that's what we built. So that's how I use science fiction. Short answer.
I would have loved to seen his face when you gave him that out.
Yeah.
I'll pay some money for that.
It was so far out of, I think for a lot of people, it's really far out of their experience of, like we talked about earlier, doing a task. Somebody gives you a task. We need to have a legal disclaimer here. Make sure it covers, okay, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and stop and go have lunch. As opposed to create a completely new experience that nobody's ever seen before. And okay, that's not a task, that's a goal. So I love those. Those to me are, that's my jam. That's what I like to do, is I like to have people come to me and say, we don't know how to get from here to here. We're stuck this. Everybody's doing this thing. We know something else is going to happen. Now it's AI. A couple of years ago it was blockchain, whatever. And say, using that technology, how do we make this current mode of thinking obsolete? So that to me that's more exciting than doing what I'm told, I guess, is being given a goal and meeting the goal in ways that are unexpected.
Atrociously bad at listening. At least I tell myself that. I will intentionally go out and do things different ways just because I'm curious. You might give me your way. I'll do your way a few times, but then at that one point I'm going like, I want to do it in a different way. Probably also because I get bored a little bit fast.
Oh yeah.
Which is why I enjoy AI right now. It's fast moving. There's a bunch of stuff going on. There's so much happening. I can't keep up with it all. It's great. There's always something new, something different to do. I'm never going to run out of shit. At least it seems like that at the moment.
I think, and I'll just say this really quickly. No, I'll wait till after we're done. It's a comment. I'll comment later.
See, that's very cool to the person listening. I'm just going to say it on their behalf.
You can edit this out then. Okay, I'll say it and you can edit it out later. You keep saying that you tell yourself, I'm too stupid to do this right, and you keep using words that are negative as a joke, but what you're doing is you're positioning yourself outside of your own society. And you're saying, I know people have ostracized me because I'm goal-oriented, So I'm going to use their language as a superpower instead of just saying their language is incorrect. But you're not stupid and you're not bad at it and you're not slow and you're not a bad listener. It's that you're thinking in systems and a much longer story arc than they are. They're thinking in steps and you're thinking in systems. And that doesn't make you a bad listener. It means that they told you something and it sparked something in you and you should really follow that. But I don't think you're stupid or slow. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that that language shapes the way people see you because you're telling them to. And it's not that you're stupid. It's that you approach problems from a solution perspective, not from a task perspective.
Little insight, Danish are very, very much use self-irony. That's basically Danish.
Totally got it. And I'm
that's
just
a big part of it. You probably get it. I know like a few people like, wait, what is this guy speaking about? I'm just Danish. That's just how we do.
No,
we like to humble brag. Like
that's
the completely opposite side of what we do. Like you don't hear, like we don't really speak ourselves up very much because over here it's like let your actions speak for you. Like if you go up brag to a Danish person, they're gonna look weird. You're like, fuck this guy. I don't want to speak to him again. But yeah, you're right. It's definitely, it catches people by surprise. And this is going to stay in because I think it's a great conversation, unless you want it to be cut out.
I don't care.
I appreciate those kind of like open conversations, and I appreciate you saying it as well, because it's definitely something to be aware of. But it's just,
well, actually, I mean that reflects from what you said. That reflects more on my lack of exposure to Danish culture than it does on your language.
Place. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Well, everybody knows Denmark nowadays, but
sure,
not so much
that was
the culture.
That was in Ted Lasso. I think that was in a TV show. Is he was like, "Wow, you really were bad today," and somebody's like, "Why are you being rude?" "Oh, he's not rude. He's Dutch." And they went, and everybody in the room goes, "Oh,
well."
What a weird thing to put into the TV show, but that was funny. So yeah, I got you. I hear you.
Yeah, there is probably a reason why a lot of people trade out Dutch and Danish people, because culturally, very similar.
I wasn't trading. I wasn't mistaking you for. No, I wasn't that. It was just.
I appreciate that.
But being in, like, if that, they very easily could have had somebody Danish go, "Oh, well, I'm just really bad at doing this. Why is he being like that? He's not. He's Danish." And everybody in the room go, "Oh," exactly. It would be the same thing. And it was such a quick way where, to me, I'm like, okay, I'll just. And my kids know me well enough, and I'm like, well, actually, Danish people, they'll be like, what Facebook, what TV show did you see that on? Like, they know that I'm just listening to the writers and going, okay, that's probably true. So, no, but I learned a lot about Danish culture today, so thank you.
And I was not trying to say that you specifically trade out people like Danish and Dutch. I just, before Donald Trump decided to try and buy Greenland, every other American I met called me Dutch. Ain't the fucking same place. There is a lot of similarities, which is, it could be worse. You could compare me to a Swedish person. We don't get into that. I can hate on Sweden for hours and hours on end, and it's okay for me to say that because I'm Danish. And if you ask a Swedish person about Denmark, they won't say a single positive thing neither. That's just how life is over here. We don't like each other, at least not publicly. But switching a little bit on subject before we get this is what happened on our meeting as well. Just completely went off the rails at some point, which I love it. It's a great conversation. But for the people that's actually still listening to us, I know you have something great planned called the AI Summit, Empire Summit. Actually, let's get the names right. Like a roundtable discussion. Could you give us some insights what that's about? Because I imagine the people that's listened to this podcast all this time gonna get a lot of value from that.
Okay, so that's shifted a bit, and I was talking with the co-founder of that this morning, and just because of the economics, the global economics of what's happening, we're trying to break that down into different things. Originally, and now it's, I think, the AI Empire Bootcamp instead of Summit, and we've broken that up into a very high level roundtable discussion with owners, and then the summit where people can just learn. The point of that, and what's now the boot camp, is to start with what is AI, how do I use the tools, how do I launch a business with it, and then also how do I actually launch a business from investment and venture capital through M&A. And it takes you from, in 3 days, I want to learn how to use AI in the new economy, to I want to build practical tools with it. And then let's see other people who are building tools, and they'll come in and we have guest speakers. Let's see how to start a company. Let's see how to get on a podcast and market yourself, which doesn't cost a lot of money, but gives people more value. And then let's talk with business people about what do companies look for in M&A? What do companies look for as an investment? What's going to be popular? What are people investing in, and what do people want to buy? So we're really trying to make it a very comprehensive set of skills that you can go from, I've never heard of this and I'm not an entrepreneur, to I could actually teach a class in this after 3 days and I know what I have to do, and I have a checklist of things to do, and everything has been done for me. There are different levels of participation where you can just observe, or we can help you a little bit, or it goes all the way through at the top level where we can actually sit with you and launch your business with you. Like if you get to the end and you've gone through the 4 different steps that we have, and you want us to sit down, at that point, we've already vetted your business. We've already given you coaching, because by the time you're at that top level, it's not just the self-service one, it's much more involved, that we're confident that your business will launch, and we'll sit down with you and we'll help you find a co-founder. We'll help you find investment if you need it. We'll help you actually launch and get an MVP out the door. So we're very excited about that. And at the same time, I'm doing a very, very basic intro to AI for absolute beginners class. I think we're going to launch it next week. And that's 4 days. So Monday, Wednesday, Monday, Wednesday. And each one is 60 to 90 minutes. There are 12 activities in it that take you from, I've never heard of ChatGPT, to by the end of it, you can build a website without knowing how to code in 15 minutes. And those are the exercises that we have over 4 days. So it's really, the people I've talked to either are experts at AI or they've never heard of it. And there aren't a lot of people in the middle. It's people like you who are going, I love AI. I can do all sorts of stuff with it, and it always changes. And there are people who are futurists and early adopters, and they're really getting into it. And then there are people who are coaches, or they run a window cleaning company and they don't care at all. So this is more for people who are aware of the fact that there's AI, to start them using it and let them learn how to use it and say, oh, I want to make a headshot. I want to make a business card. I want to make postcards for my business, whatever. What tools do I need for that? And it's all free. Like all the tools are free. The class isn't. So by the end of the class, they can actually go out and create postcards and business cards and websites and anything like that, and headshots and everything they need, and know all of the tools to do that. So that was a long answer, but that's what the summit is. The summit is now split into a boot camp and just an intro class that's online. And we're trying to get as many people upskilled and reskilled as possible to build up resilience for the economy over the next couple of years. I think that's going to be one of the most important things that we can do.
And you can really use AI for everything. Like me and my dad, for example, we're going about buying a car at the moment. I'm not a one. And it's a great asking questions, what do you need to be aware of, what's a good price for it, just spits out that. There's actually, it's starting to give very good answers to like everyday questions. It's like a great tour guide if you go to like a country like Italy, where they don't really care to translate everything into English, because
Sure,
speak Italian whilst you're there. No worries. Pull out ChatGPT, translate this for me, give me a summary, and just spits it out. It's
right.
a lot easier, makes the experience a lot better. And the boot camp, where you sit down with people and help them launch a business if they've vetted all of that good stuff. It's not that kind of like accelerator boot camp where you take half of their business, like ownership wise, correct?
No, I don't want their business. No, it's not that at all. It's
Perfect.
So we're basically mapping. We have an agency called Maslow Murphy. Maslow Murphy is a combination of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Murphy's law. So you can't become the best version of what you're trying to do until you've protected yourself from failure. So we try to do both things at once. So in that agency, there are 4 levels. If you go to my personal website, which is jeremyconescu.com,
Found links down below.
Spelled just how it sounds, then there are 4 stages to a business. You're either launching, you're growing, you're scaling, or you're trying to sell the company. And that's kind of it. So we've actually mapped out we have services to help at each one of those stages. So we have some basic gap analysis if you're trying to launch a company and get it out the door. We have a strategy session if you're trying to grow and you just need to quickly do something. We have a 48-hour quick fix program where, and I've done this for huge companies, where they'll come to me and say, we're losing $1 million a day, fix this. I'm, okay. And I tell them within a day or two, well, this is the problem. I found the problem. It's not what you think. Here's the strategic problem. Then I'll spend months, if they want me to, helping them solve the problem and embedding with their teams and fixing it. And then at the end, it's, okay, well, now I want to sell the company. And we have a whole suite of tools where we'll do an audit on your company and tell you, are you ready to sell? Do you have your financials in order? Do you have a press room ready? Like all of the things to be findable and to have somebody to automate all of the BA business analyst tool that they have to do and all the due diligence. We package that up and have it in a platform that they can just sign into. So the AI Empire Bootcamp now is mapping to each one of those stages. So the 4 levels we have are basically just mapping back to our agency services. You can either show up, or we can help you a little bit with strategy, or we can help you a lot with strategy and tactic, or we can help you by starting your company in a way that it's always built to sell. It's always designed where every day, every week, it's automatically updating press releases and your financials and everything. So if somebody comes to you and says, I want to buy your company, you give them a password, they sign in, they see all of your financials in a PDF, they get it, and they're done. That's what we're doing, is we're trying to map education to all of the stages that a company would go through.
I love that. And of course, as mentioned, the links are down below. And for the people that maybe just want to learn more about Jeremy, want to have a conversation with him, what is some good places to find you?
The best place to find me is on my website, which is jeremyconescu.com. The links are down below. And
Exactly.
yeah. And LinkedIn, I'm very easy to find. LinkedIn, I'm just my last name, Conescu. So you can find me there. You can interact with me however you want to. And I would love to talk to everybody. My goal right now is to help people help people. I'm not trying to make money off people's, situation. I'm just trying to educate and reskill as many people as we can so they're ready for the new economy that's coming up after this adolescence of AI that
I just found we are a lot more aligned than what I thought. I'll leave this as an ending note, because I've been saying for the past year. So my aim is to help as many people as possible. And the process to doing that is using leverage by helping other people help even more people. Because if I help people that already help people, I help one, they can help 10. And then it starts scaling up a lot faster. So I've loved that mission, and I'm pretty sure everybody listening is in love with it as well. At least I hope so. Get off here. Thank you very much for coming on, Jeremy. Great conversation, like always. I really, truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mads.